Marcus Thompson stared at the eviction notice in his trembling hands, realizing he had exactly 7 days to save his daughter's life, and now, he was about to lose the only roof over their heads. His 6-year-old daughter Lily needed a surgery that cost more than he would earn in 10 years, and the bank had just frozen his accounts due to medical debt. Standing outside the hospital at 11 p.m. after another failed attempt to negotiate a payment plan, the 34-year-old single father with warm brown skin and exhausted eyes felt his world collapsing around him. His worn denim jacket hung loosely on his shoulders, a reminder of the 30 pounds he'd lost from stress and skipped meals. What kind of father couldn't protect his own child? The cold November wind cut through him as he walked toward the bus stop, his faded flannel shirt and work boots offering little protection against the chill. That's when he heard the sound, a woman crying in the alley beside the parking garage. Every instinct told him to keep walking, to focus on his own impossible problems, but Marcus had never been able to ignore someone in pain. What he found would change everything. A woman in a crumpled emerald green designer dress, mascara streaming down her olive-toned cheeks, one expensive heel missing, clutching an empty champagne bottle and sobbing into the brick wall. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine and fallen straight into a nightmare. "Miss? Are you okay?" he asked gently, and when she looked up at him with those piercing gray eyes filled with more despair than he'd ever seen, he felt something shift in the universe itself. Elena Harrington had just discovered that her entire life was a carefully constructed lie. 3 hours ago, at her own engagement party, she'd walked in on her fiancé of 4 years in an intimate embrace with her own stepmother, the same stepmother who had been systematically stealing from Elena's company for the past decade. The betrayal had shattered her, and for the first time in her 32 years, the billionaire CEO of Harrington Industries had no idea who she could trust. She'd fled the penthouse party, grabbed a bottle of champagne, and wandered the streets of the city until her feet bled and her heart felt like it had been carved out of her chest. "I can't go home," she slurred, gripping the stranger's jacket sleeve. "They're all there. All of them. Waiting to take everything." Marcus didn't know who she was. He didn't recognize her face from the business magazines or the society pages he never read. All he saw was a broken woman who needed help, someone just as lost as he felt. "Okay," he said simply, helping her to her feet. "Then you're not going home tonight. I know it's not much, but I have a couch and a little girl who makes excellent hot chocolate. Can you trust me for a few hours?" Elena looked into his tired but impossibly kind eyes, eyes that expected nothing from her, eyes that held no agenda, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she nodded. It was the first genuine choice she'd made in years. The bus ride to Marcus's modest apartment was quiet. Elena leaned against the window, watching the city lights blur past, while Marcus texted his neighbor Mrs. Patterson to let her know he was almost home. Lily would be asleep by now, tucked in by the elderly woman who watched her during Marcus's night shifts at the warehouse. When they arrived at the small 2-bedroom apartment in a building that had seen better decades, Elena didn't comment on the peeling wallpaper or the mismatched furniture. Instead, she noticed the explosion of crayon drawings covering every available wall space, the shelf lined with worn children's books, and the photographs of a beautiful little girl with her father's smile displayed like precious treasures. "You have a daughter," she whispered. "She's lucky to have you." Marcus helped Elena settle onto the couch that doubled as his bed since he'd given Lily the only bedroom. He made her drink water, found her some clean sweatpants and an old t-shirt to change into, and brought her the hot chocolate he'd promised, made with the last of the good cocoa he'd been saving for Lily's birthday next month. "I don't even know your name," Elena said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Marcus," he replied, sitting in the worn armchair across from her. "Marcus Thompson. And you don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." For the first time that night, Elena smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Elena," she offered. Just Elena. They talked until 3 in the morning. Elena found herself telling this stranger things she'd never told anyone, about the loneliness of inheriting a billion-dollar company at 22 after her father's sudden passing, about the pressure of having everyone want something from her, about the gradual realization that she'd never been loved for who she was, only for what she could provide. Marcus listened without judgment, and when she asked about him, he shared too, his wife Sarah dying in a car accident when Lily was just 18 months old, the struggle to keep their daughter's memory of her mother alive, and now, the devastating diagnosis that had turned their modest life upside down. "What's wrong with her?" Elena asked, suddenly more sober than she'd been all night. Marcus's voice cracked as he explained. Lily had a rare heart condition. Without surgery, she wouldn't survive another year. With surgery, she could live a full, normal, beautiful life. But the procedure cost $500,000, and his insurance had denied it as experimental. He'd sold everything. He'd worked 3 jobs. He'd begged every organization he could find. And still, he was $200,000 short with a daughter who was getting weaker every day. Elena felt her heart shatter for this man who had nothing yet gave everything, who had found a crying stranger in an alley and brought her home instead of walking past. The next morning, Elena woke to the sound of the most beautiful giggling she'd ever heard. She opened her eyes to find a little girl with wild curly hair, mocha skin, and enormous brown eyes standing beside the couch, holding a slightly burnt piece of toast on a paper plate. "Daddy said you needed help last night," Lily said solemnly. "So I made you breakfast. Toast makes everything better." Behind her, Marcus stood in the tiny kitchen doorway, looking mortified and tender all at once. Elena sat up, took the toast, and looked into this child's innocent, generous face, the face of a girl who was dying but still wanted to make a stranger feel welcome. "Thank you, Lily," Elena whispered, and she meant it more than she'd meant anything in her entire life. But what Elena saw next stopped her heart completely, and revealed a secret that would change both their lives in ways neither of them could possibly imagine. As Elena helped Marcus clean up the modest breakfast, her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages she ignored. She noticed Lily moving slowly, getting tired easily, pausing to catch her breath after walking from the bedroom to the couch. The reality of this child's condition hit her like a physical blow. She also noticed something else, a folded eviction notice on the counter, partly hidden under a cereal box. 7 days. This family had 7 days before they lost their home and had nowhere to take a sick child. The weight of Marcus's situation, the impossible choice between medicine and shelter, between hope and survival, made her own problems feel suddenly small. Marcus insisted on walking Elena to the bus stop, apologizing for not being able to afford a cab for her. She didn't tell him that she could buy the cab company. She didn't tell him that she recognized the name of the hospital he'd mentioned because she'd donated the wing it was in. She wanted one more hour of being just Elena, of being seen as a person instead of a bank account. When the bus arrived, she turned to him and said something that surprised them both. "Can I see you again? You and Lily?" Marcus hesitated. He had nothing to offer this woman, whoever she really was. But something about the way she asked, genuine, hopeful, almost afraid of rejection, made him say yes. Over the next 5 days, Elena returned every evening after work, changing out of her designer suits in her car and arriving at Marcus's apartment in jeans and casual sweaters. She brought groceries, claiming they were on sale. She brought books for Lily, saying they were from her own childhood collection. She sat on the floor and colored with a little girl who was too weak to play outside, listening to Lily's dreams of becoming a veterinarian and having a puppy and dancing at her school recital. Each night, after Lily fell asleep, Elena and Marcus would sit together and talk for hours. About life. About loss. About what it meant to find someone who understood your pain without trying to fix it. On the 4th night, Marcus finally asked the question he'd been dreading. "Elena, who are you really? Those shoes you wore the first night, I looked them up. They cost more than 3 months of my rent." Elena's hands trembled. She knew this moment would come, and she feared it more than anything. She feared the warmth in Marcus's eyes turning cold, calculating. She feared becoming a means to an end instead of a person he genuinely cared about. Taking a deep breath, she told him everything: Harrington Industries, the billions, the betrayal, all of it. When she finished, she waited for the shift, the change that always came when people learned what she was worth. Instead, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That sounds incredibly lonely." Not, "That's amazing," or, "You could help us," or any of the things people usually said. Just recognition of her pain. Elena burst into tears for the second time in a week, but these were different tears, tears of relief, of being seen, of finally finding someone who wanted her for her wounded heart and not her overflowing wallet. Marcus held her while she cried, and when she finally pulled back, their faces were inches apart. The kiss that followed was soft, tentative, and absolutely perfect. It tasted like second chances and unexpected hope. "I'm falling for you," Elena whispered against his lips. "And I know it's only been 5 days, and I know this is crazy, but..." Marcus stopped her with another kiss. "I know," he said. "Me too." For the first time since Sarah died 4 years ago, Marcus felt his heart opening to the possibility of love again. And for Elena, who had never truly been loved by anyone except her late father, this quiet man with nothing but integrity and a beautiful daughter felt like coming home. The next morning, Elena did something she'd been wanting to do since the moment she'd learned about Lily's condition. She called her personal assistant and arranged for the surgery, but she did it secretly, contacting the hospital as an anonymous donor. She couldn't bear the thought of Marcus feeling obligated to her, of their growing love being tainted by financial dependence. The hospital called Marcus that afternoon to deliver the miraculous news: a donor had come forward. The surgery was scheduled for next week. All costs were covered. Marcus collapsed on his kitchen floor and wept while Lily, not fully understanding but knowing something wonderful had happened, patted his back and whispered, "It's okay, Daddy. See? Toast makes everything better." But then Elena discovered something that made her blood run cold, and suddenly, she wasn't sure if saving Lily had just put both father and daughter in terrible danger. Elena's stepmother, Victoria, had been doing more than stealing from the company. Through her private investigation team, Elena had discovered that Victoria had been systematically destroying Elena's father's legacy, making deals with corrupt partners, and, most devastatingly, blocking charitable donations to several hospitals, including the one treating Lily. The experimental treatment denial that Marcus's insurance had issued? It had been influenced by one of Victoria's board connections. Victoria had been hoping to force the hospital into financial desperation so she could purchase it through a shell company. Children like Lily were pawns in her corporate chess game. The surgery Elena had paid for had flagged the account, and now Victoria knew that someone had intervened. If she discovered it was Elena, she could challenge the payment. She could sabotage the surgery. She had done worse for less. Elena had to act fast. She had spent her entire adult life avoiding conflict, letting Victoria manipulate her out of loyalty to her father's memory. But now there was a child's life at stake, a child she had grown to love as if Lily were her own. She called an emergency board meeting for the following morning. She gathered her evidence. And then she did something even more terrifying. She went back to Marcus's apartment and told him everything. She confessed about the donation, about Victoria, about the danger they might be in. She expected anger. She expected him to pull away, to feel manipulated. Instead, Marcus took her hands in his and said, "Then we fight together." That night, Elena met Marcus's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who would watch Lily during what promised to be a brutal corporate battle. She met Marcus's co-workers from the warehouse who had pooled their meager resources to buy gift cards for Lily. She saw the community of working-class people who had nothing but gave everything to support each other, and she understood for the first time what real wealth looked like. It wasn't in bank accounts or private jets. It was in Mrs. Patterson bringing homemade soup. It was in the warehouse guys carving a wooden toy chest for Lily because she didn't have one. It was in Marcus staying up until midnight every night learning about business law so he could understand what Elena was facing. The board meeting was brutal. Victoria came prepared, wielding decades of relationships and veiled threats. But Elena came with something stronger, the truth. Document by document, she laid out the evidence of Victoria's embezzlement, corruption, and deliberate harm to the charitable organizations her father had spent his life supporting. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some of them had known. Some had suspected. But none of them had seen it laid out so clearly, so undeniably. When Victoria tried to turn the narrative, claiming Elena was unstable and grief-stricken, Elena played her final card, security footage from the engagement party showing Victoria and her fiancé conspiring to have Elena declared mentally unfit and removed from the company entirely. The vote was unanimous. Victoria was removed from the board, pending criminal investigation. Elena was installed as sole controlling authority of Harrington Industries for the first time since her father's death. But she didn't feel triumphant. She felt exhausted. She felt hollow. She wanted only one thing, to see Marcus and Lily. She drove straight from the boardroom to their apartment, still wearing her power suit and carrying the weight of everything that had happened. When Marcus opened the door, she fell into his arms. "It's over," she whispered. "We're safe." Lily's surgery was scheduled for 2 days later. Elena cancelled every meeting, every obligation, every responsibility to be at that hospital with Marcus. They sat together in the waiting room for 7 hours, holding hands until their fingers ached, praying to whatever power might be listening. When the surgeon finally emerged, smiling, saying the operation had been a complete success, Marcus and Elena held each other and cried tears of joy and relief. Lily would live. Lily would dance at her recital. Lily would grow up and become a veterinarian and have that puppy she dreamed of. Everything they had fought for had been worth it. During Lily's recovery, Elena spent every possible moment at the hospital. She read to Lily. She smuggled an ice cream when the nurses weren't looking. She listened to every rambling story about school friends and cartoon characters and the adventures Lily wanted to have. And every night, after Lily fell asleep, she and Marcus would sit in the hospital garden and talk about the future, a future that, for the first time, seemed bright and possible for all three of them. "Marry me," Elena said on the 6th night, under a sky full of stars. The word surprised even her. She hadn't planned them. But looking at Marcus, this man who had given her shelter when she was broken, who had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who had shown her what true courage and integrity looked like, she knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to spend her life with him. Marcus stared at her, speechless. "I know it's only been a week," Elena continued, her voice trembling. "I know it's insane. But I've spent my whole life doing what made sense, and it brought me nothing but misery. You and Lily, you're the first thing that's ever felt right. Please say yes." Marcus didn't answer with words. He pulled her close and kissed her with everything he had, all the love he'd been afraid to feel again, all the hope he'd thought was lost, all the gratitude for this impossible miracle that had walked into his life wearing a ruined dress and one missing shoe. "Yes," he said against her lips. 1,000 times yes. They decided to get married immediately, not because of the whirlwind timeline but because they had both learned that life was precious and unpredictable. Why wait to start forever when forever could begin today? The wedding was small, held in the hospital chapel so that Lily could attend from her wheelchair. Mrs. Patterson cried the entire ceremony. Marcus's warehouse friends wore their best clothes and wiped their eyes when they thought no one was looking. Elena's board members attended in shock, unable to reconcile the fierce CEO they knew with this glowing bride who couldn't stop smiling at a man in a rented suit. But Elena had never been happier. She wasn't marrying Marcus despite his circumstances, she was marrying him because of who he was, because of the character that had been forged in struggle, because of the love that had grown in the most unlikely of places. When Lily was discharged 2 weeks later, she went home to a new apartment, not a penthouse, because Marcus insisted on something modest, but a comfortable 3-bedroom in a good school district with a backyard for the puppy Elena had already secretly arranged. They were a family now, bound not by blood but by something even stronger, by choice, by love, by the belief that good things could happen to good people even when the world seemed impossibly dark. A year later, on the anniversary of the night they met, Elena and Marcus sat on their back porch watching Lily chase her golden retriever across the grass. Her surgery scar was barely visible. Her laughter was loud and free. She was healthy and happy and alive. "Thank you for stopping that night," Elena said, leaning her head on Marcus's shoulder. "Thank you for not walking past." Marcus kissed her hair. "Thank you for needing help. Thank you for letting me see you." They watched their daughter play, their hands intertwined, their hearts full. Elena used her resources to establish the Lily Thompson Foundation, dedicated to paying for life-saving surgeries for children whose families couldn't afford them. Marcus, who had once been skeptical of charity, ran the community outreach division, connecting with families who were facing the same impossible choices he had faced. Together, they saved hundreds of lives. Together, they proved that one act of kindness, one decision to help a stranger instead of walking past, could change the entire world. Marcus still made hot chocolate when any of them had a bad day. Lily still believed that toast made everything better. And Elena, who had spent her whole life surrounded by people who wanted her money, had finally found what she'd always been searching for, a family that wanted only her love. Their story spread across the internet, inspiring millions of people to look beyond circumstances and see the humanity in everyone they met. It reminded the world that love doesn't follow rules or timelines, that the person who changes your life might be waiting in the most unexpected place, and that sometimes, the brokenness that brings us together is the very thing that makes us whole. Some stories are meant to be told. Some love is meant to be witnessed. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring tales that remind us why we believe in second chances, unexpected love, and the extraordinary goodness that exists in ordinary people. Share it with someone who needs to remember that their happy ending might be just around the corner, even if it starts with helping a stranger find their way home.